Start the recording. Fabulous. Again, very warm welcome. I'm Atul, founder of Leadership at Humanity. A little bit about Leadership at Humanity, who we are and what we do. Leadership at Humanity was founded in year 2021. If we can go to the next slide, please. With a single objective of humanizing business leadership. I spent about 33 years in a corporate career, working in different broad human resources roles. And I did feel that there was a need to reignite humanity in the business leadership. With that aim and that objective, I collected a small team, which is helping me to take our message broad and far of humanizing business leadership. We run programs. We work with some large global organizations and do customized interventions. And we run initiatives, and initiatives is our way of really paying forward to the society. One of the key initiatives, in fact, one of the oldest one we started is our LEH Dialogues. In our Leadership at Humanity Dialogues, we invite those humans who have built successful lives by being who they are. And not only in the field of business, but in diverse fields. And whatever they're doing, they have been successful by living their beliefs, by living their values, and by role modeling behaviors, which could inspire a new generation, a whole lot of people around them to be like themselves. We have done over 20 dialogues since our inception. And today, we are bringing in a new episode of the dialogue with Vince. In fact, this is one of those initiatives which is very close to me personally or close to my heart. We also run a free mentoring program where we provide access of guidance and direction to those who have aspirations and dreams, but sometimes no access or no guidance to build a life or to build a career. We have covered over 300 mentees in last 4 years, and we have over 50 mentees right now being mentored by the network of mentors who we are deeply grateful to, who are guiding them and providing them direction, providing them support, hand-holding them to live their life and live their aspirations. If we can move to the next slide. So in case our audience, anyone who's interested to know what we are doing, what is coming up next, so there's a lot of excitement in the life of LEH, and we continue to do new programs, bring new initiatives. This is where you can just scan this QR code and follow us on LinkedIn, which is very active, where we post all our events and all our programs. So with that, let me go back to our dialogue today. So I want to talk a little bit about Vince before I hand it over to him to unfold his life story. So as I was saying, in our dialogues, we invite those humans who have built a life on the basis of foundations of their values, their beliefs, living every day what they believe in, showing the path, showing the direction to others, and being a role model of how you can show up as a deep, connected human being and still be very successful. So you're not navigating, you're not compromising on what you are and who you stand for, but making a very successful life. Vince is one of those iconic leaders, I would say. I had the opportunity to observe, to work with, and get inspired. My interaction with Vince goes back about 12 years when I saw him and met him for the first time. And his quiet presence really took me in. He doesn't talk much. In fact, I observed when I sat in the leadership team meetings and observed the leaders along with Vince in that room, I think he would take 5 words to say, which others would probably take 25 or 30 words to convey. So he had that very quiet, very calming presence in the room. The other thing which stood out for me, Vince, when I used to observe you, I've been a keen observer, by the way, of human behavior. And even it's a habit which has been deeply embedded to observe how people show up. And I was like looking at your intellectual humility. I think you know a lot, but you do not overwhelm people with that awareness or that knowledge you bring on the table. So there is this intellectual humility which stood out for me. Your ability to stand clear on your beliefs. not fumble, not stumble if something is not going in line with what you expect, but very calmly, very confidently staying true to your beliefs and doing the right thing. A few interactions, personally for me, especially during very tough phases, restructuring and all that we were part of, just gave me that hope, that inspiration that you don't need to compromise. You can be yourself. You can be very successful and you can make a change happen. So many times you come across those leaders when in your careers or in your lives, you say or you feel, I wish I could be like him or like her. You're one of those leaders for me. So next few minutes, I'll just share with the audience and then I'll hand it over to you. So what's going to happen is I'm going to hand it over to Vince, who would share his life journey and inspire us. And then I'm going to get into a dialogue, and I can't wait for it. I was telling Vince just before the start of the dialogue that while I'm your host, and I'm obviously very excited, but I'm also the audience, and I have my own curiosity and my own questions for you. So I'm looking forward to that. And finally, I want to say all those who have joined us today for the dialogue, it's for you. It's not for me or for my team. So feel free to engage, ask questions. You can come off mute and ask your questions, or you can actually use the dialogue box. So ask questions to Vince. So with that, Vince, I will hand it over to you. Over to you, Vince.
Thank you very much, Atul, for the nice introduction and for having me. As you said, I had the pleasure to work with you for many years when you have been with us in Mondelez. And it was great to lead in those years people and business in real and great partnership. So thanks for that. So Atul asked me a few months ago if I could join him on a dialogue about the essence of leadership. So honestly, I'm not sure whether I can give you the full essence of leadership, but maybe I can give you some insight after whatever, close to 40 years of personal experience in the industry. And so that's a bit the humble attempt for today. Maybe starting with a bit of my personal background, as you can see here, I'm born in and lived the first 20 years of my life in Italy, in a very northern part of the country, in the middle of the Alps, so mountains and forest and whatever were surrounding me for quite a while. I was grown up on a farm, and as always on the farm, pretty in sync with nature. And those apples you see, we have zillions of those, and I grew up in the middle of all of them. If you go to the next page, please. It's a bit more personal. I'm married. We have two kids. Well, kids, a bit relative, 27 and 25 years old, all well grown up and doing well. As I said, was grown up in Italy. We lived as a family in 4 countries and have moved in those countries several times. People sometimes say seems to be a good blend between Italian and Swiss personality. So what the hell does that mean? So I think I have a certain creativity when it comes to the Italian side, but still I would call it a very precise and structured view on my life forward and in business. So it seems to work well in the blend. I love skiing. I'm very lazy at the moment when it comes to running, and I'm restarting biking. So I invested in a bike, so I need to get to the return of that bike by doing much more than I'm doing now. I was always interested in architecture. I think that is why because I think I admire people who are able to create new things and stay, the combination out of artistic and of art elements as well as very concrete, tangible stuff. And if there's one key sentence or key motto in my life, which I kept running, is this kind of what is thinkable is also possible. Sometimes it's just a matter of time or sometimes a matter of money, whatever, but what you can think, you can also do. And you see the pretty couple of months back photo for myself, that's in the younger years. So that's a bit on myself. Maybe you go to the next page. As everyone's life, I think you're very much grounded and formed yourself by where you're coming from. So I think as I came from the world I just explained, I think I got a few elements with me. One is be respectful, remain humble, work hard, performance counts, and create value for generations. And I think that even in different contexts, could it be in the agriculture part, could it be in the business part, or in my personal life, I think was creating a thick foundation, I would call it, and base ground for myself. On my career, maybe go to the next page, please. Just quickly checking. Yeah. In a way, it's I would say a story of 3 chapters, I would call it, you know. I started at that time called the craft, you know, 11 years running in marketing and sales functions. Those who live in Europe may recognize the lilac cow, which is a famous symbol of chocolate, you know. So this happened in my early years in a multinational. Then I stepped out and I moved to Red Bull in years where, or in a moment where they had been not very famous, maybe crazy in one country, but not around the world. So I joined them in the early stage of their life, and rejoined to a certain extent Kraft and later Mondelez for the last 18 years now. First doing chocolate for Europe, then some countries, and then the last 6 years I was leading the European region for the company. Go to the next page. I think the reason why I'm splitting up that way, I think looking back, it was not planned that way, but I think I was living in 2 very different worlds, business worlds. On one side, if I call Mondelez, on the other side, Red Bull, the multinational trust or the multinational entrepreneur. I need to think about Red Bull in the years where this was really an entrepreneurial company, like still today, but you know, smaller, everything was possible. So you see the super structured versus hands-on. You see the management versus the entrepreneur. You see the mature company versus the full startup. There was a fantastic mix, which I realized afterwards, you know, that that made me maybe also to do that what I was able to do then afterwards, being back to Mondelez in this duality of elements. There's one common element between the two, highly professional, you know, performance counts, there's no difference. But the way how companies have done it was very, very different in that sense. Good. Let's maybe go a bit deeper into what we call leadership, and maybe go to the next page, please. People sometimes, or I'm hearing from people that are saying, how leadership has changed. And personally, I do believe that leadership itself, the principles, what leadership means, has not really changed. I think what's changed dramatically is the speed and the disruptive impact of change. So if you think about the last couple of years, I think we all have been going through things like COVID, political intervention, hyperinflation, supply chain constraints, and whatever. And they came up pretty much, I would say, overnight. So I think the speed how things pop up and the impact they can have is much higher, I would say, than ever we have been faced maybe in the past. And thinking forward, you know, famous artificial intelligence and what may come on top will not make it slower and will not make it less disruptive. So I think leadership itself is more about how to adapt to the speed, not so much how to adapt leadership. So it's more about the timeline, it's more about the analytical element, it's more about the feeling of the impact, it's about the understanding of the impact, and to translate that for yourself and for the teams you are leading. And that's obviously getting difficult because if you think some of those disruptions we had in the past, on some of them, no one had a playbook. In COVID times, you know, whoever went through a pandemic situation. So how to handle these things, you know, that's more the question than is there a new leadership required? If you go to the next page, please. I just want to give you less than a handful elements or headlines, maybe, what I think leaders, the role of leaders is still to be done and to do. One is simplify. I think the world is not getting simpler. I call it over communication we're all facing is just tremendous. So there's a lot of many things happening. And as a leader, one of your most, if not the most critical element to lead is simplify the whole thing. I call it, you need to make black and white decisions. Black and white decision means you draw a hard line saying yes or no. At the same time, you know in the same moment, the world is gray and it's not a yes or no, but people are looking for clear direction. And if you are not clear in what you say, it will be getting less clear even further down in the organization. I don't know whether you are familiar with this little game kids are doing. They stand up in a row, and then one starts to whisper a sentence to the next one. And they give it on and give it on and give it on. And guess what comes out after the 10th or the end of the row? It's for sure something different. And it's because people are not listening. Maybe the sentence was very complex, you know. So think about that chain of communication you have. So if you're not clear, if you're not making black and white decisions, if it's not a simple communication, and you don't have consistent messages, it will be very, very difficult on big organizations to give directions. Because at the end, you only give directions. It's a frame. People can then obviously within the frame operate. Yeah? But that's one of the most critical elements. And you will sit in many, many ways in a situation where saying it's a 70-30 decision. But you cannot say 70-30. It's either 100 or it's 0. So keep that in mind. I think that's the higher you come and the broader the group you lead, simplify. Make the left on the picture to the right. Another one, maybe go to the next page, is I call it a zoom out. And zoom out is something, I think we're all very professional in that what we do. And we have a tendency, I've seen it in our organization, everyone is diving in. It immediately goes into execution. It immediately goes to the details. It immediately goes to how we want to do things, which is great because at the end, that's the execution, that's the result, how you deliver the target. But as a leader, I think you should be careful that you're not very fast the dive in or part of the dive in. You are the ones listening. You're the ones zooming out and always take one step back as a check. That can be silent. That can be, meanwhile, everyone is talking. As Atul was saying, I like very much let the others talk because A, you learn, and B, you connect a bit what's going on, and you may conclude faster for yourself, So zoom out before you dive in. The other thing leaders have, and that's I've seen in my career, and that's not different to others. I always said, I'm not 1 inch smarter than my people, but I think as I'm high up maybe, or have longer been in a company or have been longer leading, you have seen more. So you have potentially more dots in your brain, which you can connect. So people sometimes in a world where everyone is working in a bit in silos or on specific parts, everyone becomes an expert. And the leader is normally the least expert in things. So her or his job is not being another expert, but being the one who is connecting things she or he has seen in the past. And I also believe that innovations, for example, at least in 80% or 90% of the industry, are not driven by totally new things. Innovations and new ideas are coming by connecting existing things in a different way. So I think by zooming out, by connecting those dots, and by doing that as a leader, you are always framing things and you're contextualizing for your team. And again, framing is one of the key leadership elements. That it's not about you deciding, it's about you deciding, but it's not about you to executing. So keep that in mind, and I think it's a very healthy element in particular when it comes to difficult situations, hot situations, or very, very long discussions on specific topics. A third element, if you go to the next one, please. I call it this is right or wrong. And I think as you all, assuming leading teams, I've never seen or very rarely seen a presentation or recommendation coming on my table, which was not logic. The people were very, very trained on that the number on page 5 is consistent with the number on page 10 and that the story holds. And there are a lot of facts which is saying, okay, it's very logic how how we want to do it, and that's the reason why we want to do it. But I do think that, and I strongly believe that logic doesn't mean equal it's right. I tend to say many things which are right can also be logic, but not everything which is logic must be right. So what's the difference? The difference is that obviously you need facts. Obviously you think you need facts. Obviously you need data. Obviously you need to have a logic flow of why you recommend something. But there's then a discussion which needs to be added on, which is then the experience, observation, intuition. Those are elements which I think we are underestimating. Observation is one of my beloved ones. Learning by observing. That's, by the way, how kids are learning in the early years. They're just observing parents, the environment, and that's how they learn. So by adding that one, and by asking this question, why are we doing this? And is it the right thing? That's a very different dialogue. I'll give you an example out of my time at Red Bull. The first question in Red Bull was never, what does it cost and what does it bring? That was the question number 2. The question number 1 was, is it right or is it wrong? And if it's wrong, we don't need to go to question number 2 because wrong is wrong. But if it's right, then let's continue. And you might ask or might say, well, that's not a hard KPI. How should I measure that one? But I think I'm very big fan, if I may, of the word right. Because right is something which you feel, if something is right or it's wrong. Think about your private life. You make a decision on, I don't know what. At the end, you ask yourself, is it right or wrong what we do or what I'm doing? Is it right to buy that whatever car, whatever you want to do or not? And I think it's more than just the pure logic. And do me if you want, do me a favor. In the next meeting you might have, ask at a certain point, out of the blue, is this right or wrong what we do? And I'm guessing that it will be silent for a while because people are not trained on that thing. But it's very helpful because it's another zoom out on the whole thing. So I think wrong, right is the right question to have, at least maybe silent for you or for the whole team. A fourth one, which I think is one of the most important one, we go to the next page, please, is the care to dare. Yeah. And I think that's is a concept that I think Atul, we were saying, I think the whole movement, the whole philosophy you have behind is a bit around that element, Definitely lack of caring ultimately kills people's energy, creativity, engagement, And if sometimes people have this contradiction that caring and daring, is a bit contradicting. You have to be tough, you have to be, very hard to everything, to everyone to get the result. I don't think that's the right approach. I think you need to care about people to dare for the high performance. So if you aim for high performance teams, if you aim for really high performance in the market, and we're all working in highly competitive environments and everyone is behind everyone, if you really want to win, I think you need to have this caring element on. I put on the bottom of this slide a book which I got to know, I think, a couple of years back from George Collery. So he's a professor at the IMD in Lausanne. So if you have more interest in that, it's a very thin book, but I think he explained very much that care to dare concept. So it's worth to read if you like. But I think it's definitely the essence, I would call it, of leadership, because if people feel insecure, if people feel not, I would call it protected in a good environment, they cannot flourish. And again, you also need to compare business with maybe with family or friendship and whatever. If kids are not feeling protected, if they're not feeling cared, they cannot develop. If you want to bring the best out of your kids, or you want to be whatever great friendship with someone, people need to feel them protected, so they can be open, they can be creative, they can speak out what they think, not being afraid that if it doesn't go right, it might have consequences. Now, if you don't move it, there will always be something going wrong, but people need to feel that it's at a certain extent okay, otherwise you will not try. Because leadership also means you're just at the top of the house. You will never make it happen. You're not the solution maker. You're not the executor of the whole thing. So you need to drive the people. Otherwise, you will not drive the business. And the side effect is if you drive the business, you have driven the people, and then people can develop themselves and flourish on their own. So that's, I think, the commonality between caring to daring, and I think that's a quite nice concept. Well, I think it's more than a concept. It's leadership in its essence, I would call it. In that way, maybe go to the next page, and that goes very, very many years back at university, and they had a professor in leadership. So years back means 35 years, so it's quite old. But there was once a session which I remember. It was not even a book. It was a session where he was drawing something on a piece of paper, and he was saying, in his mind, here's the definition of success. And he was saying S equal K times E times B. And then he explained it, saying, well, it's knowledge times experience times behavior squared. Quite interesting. And he's saying, look, there's two elements in this formula which you should understand. There are three elements which are multiplied. So by definition, if one is 0, the entire thing is 0. And behavior squared means it's the most important one in that formula. And I think I found that very impressive. And so, I kept it in my mind for now pretty much 40 years. And I think he was right, or he is right. You can't lead a business and people. You need to know your business. Otherwise, it's not really helpful. You need to be experienced in what you do, because you need to connect the dots, what I said before. That's why you're enriching the whole thing. And your behavior will make the success, because that is what drives people. So I think it's a very simple thing to remember. But again, as all these things are very simple, it's very hard to apply them in real. But I think it's so helpful one-liners or spotlights or whatever, which I like very much in my head, because I always said I can only keep 3 things in my mind, so that helps. It's only 3 things, so it's a good exercise, And last but not least, before I'm giving back to you, Atul, is if you ask me what's really the essence of leadership, go to the next page, which is my final one. And it's a bit obviously linked a bit to the Red Bull time, but I think, look, they have not used that one, but I combined it and saying, look, it's all about giving wings to people and ideas. That's, I think, is really what's the inspiring element. Now, I have been working in very, like with my team, very tough environments, like you all potentially. It's very difficult to keep all these things in balance, because the reality is you're fully pressured by the business. There's always something happening. There's always from 8 o'clock to 8 in the evening, one meeting after each other. There's never a moment to pause. There's never something where you really can give wings to people and ideas. There is no session. There's nothing to plan. It's just it's a behavior you need to have inherent in yourself. And I think even you have it in yourself, you need to remind yourself on that thing. You need to pause. You need to breathe. I've put in my calendar, and people who know me knows that one. Pretty much every week, 1 hour in my calendar, like a formal appointment. I called it the TTT, time to think. And that's something which because otherwise your calendar gets full for the next, in the next minute. But that was something I kept for myself. And it could be an hour for myself, could be meeting with someone else, could be discussing and dialoguing on something specific, but it was time to think. Because time to run, we don't need to look for, because that's happening automatically. And then you forget this other element. So it's a very simple, leadership is very simple on a piece of paper and in understanding and in putting whatever, headlines on, but it's very difficult in the storm of the day to really make it happen. And guess what? Many mistakes made, and backwards you think about, okay, you should have done it differently or whatever, but no, that's life. You cannot be, no one is perfect. With that, Atul, back to you. Hopefully a good way into the discussion to have.
Fabulous. Well, I don't know where to start, Vince. I was very curiously and keenly listening to what you said. And you talked about simplicity, and I think you just took a very tight leadership lesson in about 20 minutes in a very, very, very simple way. I think we're all kind of better informed and more educated on leadership. I'll just take probably a minute to share with you what really stuck out for me in this discussion. You talked about the three things which stay with you. I'm like you. I can't have more than three things coming in at me at a time. So I think you talked about the art of possibilities, because when you say what is thinkable is doable, what an amazing way to look at what is possible versus what are the limitations. And many times, in my life, during my corporate world and now in the second phase, people end up looking at limitations and why they cannot do something and just go into that kind of rat hole, find it very difficult to come out. But when you change your mindset and look at possibilities and what is possible, the whole world starts to feel and look very different. I think the second thing which stuck with me is when you talked about how to deal with disruptions. And disruptions happen because a lot of things we don't plan. These things just happen around us. But the way you explained, the attitude Vince you bring in to that disruption, how do you show up? People are looking up to you. How do you show up in the face of that disruption is what really starts to make a difference. You talked about dealing with ambiguities, bringing a black and white decision in a gray world is so true, because the world is never going to be black or white. But if you are just vacillating and delaying decisions, people get confused and you don't get to the right outcome. So you might end up making sometimes wrong decisions, but you still make a clear call, which gives people clarity in terms of where to go. And finally, what really struck a chord with me is doing the right thing. We have a value, by the way, in LEH. First thing I did when I formed LEH was create our 6 values, which will guide us and direct us. And I think these values hold you tight during the face of uncertainty or during the face of ambiguity. And one of our values is doing the right thing. And when you said this word right has something, a deeper meaning for you, it really strikes very, very deep personally, because once you have that clarity, what is right, then you don't fumble to make the most difficult calls. So I just want to call out, it was an amazing, amazing, complete told story of a life which is built on values, which is built on beliefs, and which has created outcomes, not for yourself, but for so many other people who benefited from you having you as their leader. So I have a long list of questions which are already coming up in the dialog box, but I want to start with one of mine first. Vince, what motivates you to get up every morning and go and make a difference? So there are good days, bad days, tough choices. What is the motivation which has driven you to make the impact you've been able to make?
Yeah, I think it was always the same thing from my early days. I think I call it, I always want to make a difference. And maybe in the early days was more a difference because I was just started in marketing, enthusiastic marketing, a difference in the consumer world, creating a product, creating a concept which is really lasting long. So I find this difference. Then over time, that became making a sustainable difference, kind of it should stay longer than just for a while. And then it moved from a thing to the people side, because you realize at the early stage of your career, you're pretty much focused on yourself. You're on the lowest level of the hierarchy, so you need to run there. But the more you go up, you realize you're not alone, and B, it will not work with you alone. So you have to go up, and then it was the difference for the people. And as I said before, this care and dare concept, it's just a win-win, I would call it. If people find the caring element, they can flourish and develop themselves. If they do well, the company will do well. And that's very, very simple, no? And I think that was then over time making a difference for the people in equal meaning than for the company itself. And that was always a driver. Now, obviously, happy moments where saying it was a bit harder to get out of the bed, because the day is maybe a difficult one. But
Yes.
overall, I think I felt very grateful for, obviously, very grateful for the possibilities of my life and my career. But also, I always was enthusiastic and energetic enough to get up and run. Yeah.
Fabulous, fabulous. All right. Well, I have a long list of questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to request people to come off mute and bring up their own question to you. So maybe I'll start with, and no particular order because all these questions are great questions. So Frank Schiller, if you are hearing my voice, you can come off mute and bring up your question, please. Frank.
Thanks a lot, Atul. Great to see you again, Vince, after quite some years. So my question is around you mentioned obviously how the business and actually the entire world is getting simply more complex and the speed is increasing day by day. So when you look back and in your experience, how do you balance that pressure running faster and faster, but in the same time really driving some meaningful change in that world, and also to lead in a really in a human way, giving people also the space simply to process, to adapt, and to grow in these circumstances? How do you do that? Thank you.
Hi, Frank. Good to see you again. Hello. It's not, as you said, it's not an easy one, but I think one element you realize, one element is really, as so many things have happened. If you would have, for example, I was leading for 6 years the European business. If someone at the beginning of my start in that role would have told me what happened in the next 6 years, I would say, A, it's impossible. It will not happen. And if it happens, we will all collapse. A, it happened, and B, we have not collapsed. We have been even growing. So I think you normally you don't know how much you really can cope with the situation. Second, you realize you have to be even more calm and structured in the way forward than ever, because the chaos is increasing. So one element I'm applying is I try to stay very calm, but the only way to stay calm, I need two things. I need to understand the problem. If I'm not understanding the problem, I remain nervous. But as soon as I'm understanding it, I think I know that I think I know the direction, and I know how to organize it for the team and with the team to cut the elephant in pieces. And by that, sounds strange, by creating this structure, by creating this sometimes black and white, people feel the chaos is automatically reducing because they have an element to work on. Now, how to fix that one, how to eat the piece of the elephant, that no one knows, people will do. But I think there was one element, one moment I think we all went through, the pandemic one, where overnight this thing got to a stop in the whole thing. And we had more than 60 factories standing still, and you wake up and saying, what are we doing? No playbook, nothing, you cannot say anything, because there's nothing you can order, because how to communicate. And I realized that what the strength of a team is. People are very knowledgeable about what they do. They connected the dot themselves. They were leading, but I think it was driven by, they have done it in the past. They know the structure, they know the direction we wanted to go, and it worked. It really worked. So I think it's a bit this chaos. What are you doing against chaos and speed? I think my answer would be understand and structure sounds strange, but I think cut it in a frame, cutting it and framing it. So that helps to get through. First yourself, and second the organization.
Thanks a lot. Great answer.
Thanks very much for the question Frank, and great response, Vince. I think there's a connected question, but in a broader context, from Christian. Christian, you want to come off mute and bring up your question, please?
Absolutely, because I think it fits well. Thank you, Atul. And nice seeing you again, Frank, and some others from Mondelez, Vince. I was really sort of needing some practical strategies, right? So fostering a culture of trust, transparency, and open communication within a team or the organization. What do you have, as a couple of us are really keen on getting some practical strategies from your side? What could you do? What have you done?
Again, in which situations, Christiana? So again,
In a totality, as I mean, in the culture of trust, you talk about the care to dare and everything. So it's the culture of trust and transparency, obviously, coming with this one. How practically have you done that?
Well, I think first of all, I think you said at the beginning, I told people are observing leaders. You know, I think they're very much again they interpret many things what they see, not just what you say about, but how you behave without talking. You know, so I think one element to create trust and to get trust is that first of all you need to be authentic. People have a very fine understanding if that's more a bit of a role you play or whether that's really you. And I think that's was always in my life important, that I cannot play a role, but I cannot play a role for long. I can play it maybe for a meeting because it's more political than it should be, but I cannot do it for long. And people have a very fine radar on, is that him or her? That is creating a very strong foundation. So people, and then obviously in my case, it was long enough, I would say, in specific companies or roles. So people could read me, and I think people could understand what I mean. And people also understood when it's more serious than it is. So there have been also moments where saying, look, now we are on a certain point, we need to do it totally different. And there's a different, maybe tone, maybe different speed, but always with a respect for the people. So I think it's like again, I always go back to family and friendship. It's a similar thing there. It's just at a bigger scale. Family, normally a small group of people, friendship is a bigger group, but it's always the same thing. If people know who you are and people can see and not just read, but also see how do we do it, I think that's the best way. And I think those around you who know the best are the ones which trust you the most. Obviously, in a big organization, that needs to go with different tools.
Merci, thank you.
Well said. Well, thank you very much, Christian. And again, what a powerful response, Vince. I'm going to go to my friend Sunita Bangar next. Sunita, you want to come off mute and bring up your question? Sunita, if you're there.
Yeah. Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. No, so I was very fascinated when you said, you need to decide in your mind what is right and wrong. And I'm just trying to understand in this complex world, is there anything which is so clear about right and wrong? Because isn't that very relative at times? And if you have multiple things that you are sort of trying to juggle, what is right for one may not be right for the other. But how do you really decide the right and wrong?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. Like, let me maybe slightly correct. It's not, when I said right and wrong, it's not, in my part, was not me deciding it's right or wrong. I think sometimes your role is to stimulate that type of question. You need to bring that in the room, because obviously I'm not sure what is right and wrong, but I think, as I said, we're very much trained in getting things done. And then you go into the execution and you talk about what makes it sometimes fixed. And I think to make it very extreme, you can be the fastest on a mountain, but then if you realize on the top, it was the wrong mountain, it was useless, and that's a bit the thing. So I think it's not the leader to decide right or wrong, but I think it's you as a leader to bring that type of question in. And again, maybe I don't think it's me, but I think this word right has more elements than just is it logic or whatever. Sorry. Mm-hmm.
No, the only reason I was asking is because the kind of role that I played, I have multiple stakeholders, and at times we don't have the same agenda. And in that scenario, if you're trying to do right or wrong with 20 other senior leaders, it can get very difficult. So even if I let them decide what is right or wrong, we probably will have a whole volume written about us before we can get to that conclusion. So I was just wondering, is there any kind of shortcut to say, okay, even if it's 60% right, but let's get down to executing, or do we wait for the 100% right?
No, I think, again, the right is just another, I would call it a quality dimension to judge on what you're on. And I think I'm not saying that the question of right or wrong is then changing. I would say 9 out of 10 thing might be just keep going, what's on the table. So I think the right question, the best one would be, why or why not are we doing it, And again, I think it's more a quality check into the conversation, a quality check of the decision, than it everyone is wrong and now someone else comes with the right thing. But I think it's this quality check, and I've seen it in our company. The great thing, we are super speedy, super execution. We have really, a great team. But sometimes we're running, to my early example, fast on the wrong mountain, to the wrong mountain versus checking. So it's a quality question, not a yes or no question, if I may.
I guess 60% alignment, 100% commitment is good to go.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunita. Great question. Thanks, Vince. I'm going to go to Martin. Martin, great to see you. You want to bring up your question?
Yes. Hi, Vince. Nice to see you again. Vince, my question is, you talked about, you're listening, you're framing, you're contextualizing, and connecting probably more dots based on experience or connecting them differently. When you are then sharing your thoughts back, you likely focus on the what. How do you resist when you're very engaged, when you're curious, when you want to help? How do you resist not going into the how? And have you always consistently managed to stay out of the so-called details? And how did you do it?
I think that, Martin, you got my weak point in my career, because I'm not very good, but that's a lifelong feedback with me, which is saying stay out, Gruber, because you're right. The difficulty is, in particular, when you have a lot of knowledge, in particular, when you're very curious, when you have high motivation on a few things, you tend to get yourself in. And that's, again, I know myself, and the team would still confirm it. I'm sometimes tend too much going into or leaders tend to too much going into the how to make it happen. I think it's not totally a bad thing, I would call it, but I know as long as you don't forget your real job, which is the one to zoom out, not just jiving with everyone in. So I think everyone has a bit different style, but definitely the role of a leader is to zoom out, the right, wrong, the black and white, and all these elements I said, that needs to be done. If that's not happening, you're just one more in running. Then you want to participate or not participate to the race, that's a bit then personal style. And if you have a strong team, they push you out at the right level,
The reason why I've been asking this question, Vince, is not to point at something that would be weak. I've experienced you, as Atul has described it, as an extremely humble, good listener, super smart in connecting the dots pretty quickly, but also highly engaged. And I think when you have such a profile and you're highly engaged and you're truly, honestly trying to help, it's sometimes hard to keep out of, some thoughts that come to mind about how you could do it. And I've experienced you super smart also in how you address those things. So it was really out of curiosity to understand how you manage this, because there is a tension, right?
Absolutely. And I think, look, that I would call then, Martin, that is saying, look, there are different leadership styles, different styles to run the business. There are people who cutting their engagement or involvement at the earlier stage of the element and further go further down. I would call it acceptable tolerance, I would say, between call it style or taste or color. But again, the important part is that the first part cannot be missed. That cannot be delegated. That's why you are the leader and not one of your team only. So that's my point.
Thank you.
Fabulous. Martin, thanks very much. Vince, thank you again for a great answer. And Kathy, it's so wonderful to see you on the dialogue today. I'm going to come to you, and please come off mute and raise your question.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Atul. Great to see you as well as you, Vince, again. And thank you, Atul, for putting together these wonderful sessions, and Vince for sharing your insights. My question to you is, having seen your leadership style firsthand at Mondelez and how you inspire teams, can you share a bit about your growth and development and a leader that has helped shape you, and sort of what that lesson might have been?
Again, I think I was never focused on my own career, I would say. It was always I was always focused on what I'm doing, and I had the pleasure and I was lucky enough, I would say. I always had good mentors in my career who at a certain point popped up and gave me another opportunity. So I think the biggest learning curve I had always was I got always a bit of a stretch more, or a higher stretch in my next role, where in the first moment I thought, oops, I'm not sure, yeah, but obviously I will not say anything. Let's work harder, you know, and let's get it done. But I think that was I was very much learning on the job. Obviously, I was observing. I was at 2 to 3 great leaders in 2 different organizations, which I was really admiring for different reasons. You know, I haven't found one who is perfect on its own, but I have been very much strong in one element, that is another strong element, and they all have been made great success, great careers. But I think I was good in selecting what fits to me and what I could do more. Now everyone knows a bit, if you're honest to yourself, you know where you're strong and where you are a bit less good. So you try, you know, and I think that was making the whole thing. But the biggest jumps I made was, I would call them on the job. And to get on the job, on different jobs and different whatever levels, you need to have the opportunity for that. And I was very grateful and very lucky that I found environments, people, coaches or whatever, who helped me in moving on.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. Thanks, Vince. It's more of a statement than a question, but you know, it's so nicely captured. Massimiliano, I want to come to you, and I want you to call it out because it so nicely captures who Vince is and what he stands for. So over to you.
Thank you very much. I think it's very clear what I wrote. I'll try to repeat it in simpler words. And it's a recognition of the leadership style of Vince. It's been a true pleasure to work with Vince. It's been an honor to work with Vince. I learned a lot from Vince. He's always been very, very inspiring. And he has had a very positive impact on many, many, many people. He was always a great communicator, very clear, very succinct, very direct, and he was able always to bring the best out of his team, his people. So I can only thank you for that, Vince, and I can tell you once again, as I wrote in the message, you can only be proud of you and the way you led the team in a very complex moment, in a very complex environment. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you, Max, for that. You know, very much appreciate. Thank you. Now I'm getting red. Now I'm getting red in my face. I think we need to stop here. You know.
Absolutely. So nicely said. Thank you so much. And I think we have probably one last question. I want to give it to Praveen, who's part of our community. Praveen, over to you.
Thank you so much. In your experience, what's the most effective way to influence and drive collaboration among senior cross-functional leaders, whether it is at a peer level or one level above?
Influence factor, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think, look, one is obviously the biggest influence factor is that people have the same know where we want to go. I think that's the direction we want to go, and that can be the famous longer vision, obviously, but sometimes also find what's the shorter term we want to deliver. You know, what's the task, and I've obviously a vision is a long-term element. Sometimes I've seen that a shorter term cut that thing down to what does this mean for this year to get there. Is the more tangible it gets, you know, the more it works cross-functional and people go behind that one. And if you realize that, or if you can manage that one, I think what it's the one big element of teams is that not everyone stays in his silo, because the work is divided in 10 different parts. But the challenges sometimes are happening between the parts. It's between the chairs. It's sometimes a challenge because everyone is just focusing on what he or she is doing. The connectivity doesn't work. And that, I think that if you go for the commonality, if you understand what's in short and mid and longer term, people will bridge into the next. They will ask, is it clear? How can I help? So that the glue comes to life, the glue of a team, the glue of the result. So I think it's the clarity, and clarity means also that you measure where you are, because that's sometimes also motivational. When you say, look, we want to achieve 10, and now we are only at 5. So we really need to go hard to get to the 10, which was our own. You know, people feel in most cases, motivated. Okay, let's go for the extra mile. We don't give up. Or you're very close and saying, look, the last inch, we don't want to go, we don't want to let it go. So I think it's the combination, not just targeting, but also measuring. So it's very important in business that you measure where you are, so people can measure themselves. Where is their performance? What's their contribution? That's the biggest thing. If I would know that if I do this, my contribution to the bigger picture is material, I will do that one. Why should I not do it? Because I feel contributing. So I think that's I call it the glue. And the glue is visioning, targeting, and measuring. Now that's very rational now, but what I mean is the interpretation of them.
Fabulous.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right, Vince, we are coming to an end. I mean, this is one of those sessions I wish could continue and we could go on and on. There are so many great questions coming up, and I can see Andrew putting up a comment, someone who we both love and have a lot of respect for. So I want to thank you for your openness, for your honesty, for your simplicity, and for your inspiration in this session. I'm sure as much as I'm inspired, it inspired so many people who joined today, and so many of those who probably could not join and watch this recording of the session. You know, we have had many of these sessions, as I was saying in the beginning, but I think this is one of those which is so deeply embedded in honesty, simplicity, and inspiration, which is going to help a lot of people. So thank you very much. I want to thank Sophia and Irish from my team specifically, who've been working behind the scenes, trying to pull this together. How amazing it is for them to really engage with our guests and make sure that we very simply, in a very simplistic way, put together these sessions which continue to inspire everybody. And I just want to call out the next session. If you could pull up the slide, please, Irish. So our next dialogue is going to be on the 21st of November. And our next guest is Winnie Koch, and her story is equally inspirational. She is from Singapore, and please join us and get inspired in another session. And with that, Vince, thank you so much. And thanks to all our audience who made time for us to join us for the dialogue.
Thank you very much, Atul, and to the whole community. It was a great pleasure for me to have that conversation and dialogue with you. Wish you all the best. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thanks.